everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome to our Friday live chat with John and Marcia. And we have our special guest here, David Cranmer, Underdown, joining us for the first time. And we're very glad to have you, David. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm still thinking about your Baby It's Cold Outside performance. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And Marcia Keith, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
Me? Oh, you know me. I'm always happy to be here. Yeah, the arm is healing up. You guys know I broke my arm 2.5 weeks ago, and I only got 10 more days in the cast, and then we go and get an X-ray and see what it looks like. So, but everything's going fine. It could have been a lot worse. And yeah, it really is cold outside, is it not? Right now it's about 25, I think, here in on Mystery Island, but it's going up fast. And
it is in the next few days. I think next week we're supposed to reach into the 60s. Can hardly wait.
David, I haven't asked. I have heard that they are starting a new ice rink in Detroit, Michigan. That's going to cover most of the residential streets. At least I saw pictures of it.
Yeah, I mean that was part of the disaster, but I was surprised they didn't incorporate the Red Wings into it. I mean, people love hockey in Michigan, and I feel like with the the hockey events going on right now, that's kind of people are thinking about that. The nationalism, they like to use the sports to get Canada and America kind of fighting it out.
Yeah. I have a confession to make. I've never been to a hockey game, and I like going to live sports even if I don't follow them, just because I think there's something special about being at a live sporting event. But I've never been to a hockey game and really don't know a lot about hockey. So that's one of my goals before I go, is to go to a hockey game. Maybe you can take me to one, David.
Maybe. I'm old school. I used to, like, when I was little, the Red Wings were not a good team, but they played in Joe Louis Arena, and it was very affordable. The fans were passionate, and I remember sitting in the high up with the really drunk section, and we had a player named Bob Probert, who was he was a great goal scorer and player, but he was also a fighter in the Enforcer, and he was just the fan favorite in Detroit. So I remember that, being a little kid, going to those games and the excitement, like you said, of the the live action and the organ music and all the sounds and things to see was amazing. Unfortunately, the new stadium, Little Caesars Arena, is much more corporate. The transition into more modern stadiums is just taking away a lot of the spirit of the game, and I don't know. I like the drunk, passionate fans. As long as they're in control. I mean, I know they can get out of control, but if you like a loud crowd.
Can I just get back once just to see, because a lot of people may not know what I was talking about the turning Detroit into an ice rink, but I saw the video, and it was really, really amazing. What you had a water main break, and then all tons of water just was everywhere, and then it froze. And so everybody's car was like in 4 feet of ice all up and down this street. How big a disaster was it? And I suppose it's over now.
I haven't really explored it. I mean, I remember when they had the really bad flooding in Royal Oak, like maybe 10 years ago, where it was a terrible problem with the sewage. And then, of course, was sort of tied to the water rights issue that was, playing out in Michigan with the Flint water crisis. There was a lot of celebrities that were protesting that and doing, action in Detroit. And so, the sewer and water is a, tied to that, of course. So.
Aaron Adler. Hey, Aaron, good to hear from you as always. And I hope you're doing well. Dave says, Dave made some interesting comments the other day about the founders of the B&O Railroad being connected to today's oligarchs. And I appreciate that. I think that's a great connection to make, especially for us here in Maryland, where you have the beginning of that B&O Railroad in the city of Baltimore, and a lot of interesting people supporting it. It's, the Carroll family for one. And anyway, David, tell us a little bit more about how beginning of American railroadry in a sense, where the B&O was one of the earliest and most successful ones. How does that tie to today's oligarchs in 10 paragraphs or less?
Well, I think the main concept that I take away from it is the idea of connecting the Chesapeake to the Ohio River being a national goal, a national security, and a logistics goal for the country, going back to the Potomac and Ohio canals, and then the right of ways from the canals sort of passed to the B&O people, and like you said, it was the Carrolls, and then you had William Patterson, whose daughter, marries Napoleon's brother, Jerome Bonaparte. And her ex-brother-in-law marries the Duke of Wellington's brother, Wellesley. So you have this intrigue with the Carroll family going back to Lord Baltimore and the history and the founding of Maryland colony. And then you have the other intriguers in that is the relationship with John Hopkins is related, and he's related to the George Peabody, who was the sort of the forefather of philanthropy, and the Peabody Foundation is sort of the model of what becomes the Carnegie and Rockefeller, and it's the same lawyer.
And he took Muhlenberg County away, and so we had to write a song about it. Mr. Peabody's coal train has took it away. You mentioned philanthropy. I mentioned misanthropy in response.
Well, you know who his protege was, of George Peabody, that changed the name of his financial firm to a very famous name that everybody knows.
Who?
So Junius Morgan was his apprentice, and Junius' son is J.P. Morgan. And so the Peabody interests become J.P. Morgan. And then, of course, J.P. Morgan merges with the Chase Manhattan Bank under John McCloy, who used to teach the Rockefeller brothers how to sail as little kids. So, there is a very strong linkage to the B&O Railroad and to the Brown brothers, also financiers of the railroad with Alexander Brown and John Brown. They were merchants in Baltimore and Philadelphia, and in New York, Rhode Island, Boston, Liverpool. Brown and Shipley was there, so they're part of the trade. They manage the ports and and somebody, I forget who said it, but somebody once said that every bank was originally a merchant trader. Every bank was originally a merchant trader. So they all come from that, system. So that's why the oligarchs now that I think of that Aaron is specifically referencing is the John Hopkins and their role with disease surveillance, and with Mayor Bloomberg, who we've talked about is Flower Mountain is Bloomberg and Montefiore. So, does it, go back to this interest of the, Moncada Sephardic banking interest, which I believe, but that's really where it comes from. And then with Baltimore, you also have to talk about the Amico family, the
Blaustein building.
The Blausteins, because they hired Joe Biden's grandpa at Amico, so that's where they get in. And of course, it's problematic because they get so involved in the creation of the state of Israel, but they also have the Amico history with tetraethylene and synthetic rubber and stuff, which is a problematic thing with World War II, where people want to really funnel those activities to specific parts of the group.
Wow, that's great. I always like to put in one proviso, because I'm standing up here for Southern Maryland and the environs here, and when you mentioned the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, and then how it just got completely superseded by the B&O Railroad. And, so some of the same people were involved, but the small investors had all been talked into it by George Washington, who lives right across the river from us here. And all of the families, et cetera, that were solicited to support the building of the C&O Canal lost their shirts. So it wasn't everybody that, like always, I guess they just, the people on the inside, the insider traders jumped ship early and left everybody else holding the bag. But it's an important historical fact when you think of things like, why didn't Southern Maryland develop? Why didn't, places over across the river from us do better, instead of basically the little civilizations, the little port towns just kind of died up very soon after the introduction of the railroad.
Right. I mean, there was a time when there were a lot of little, places along the shore of Southern Maryland.
Steamboat landings.
Exactly. That had hotels and tourist trade to go with it.
All right, let's see what else comes up here. Brightmore Dinosaur, good morning. With Lansky and Fisher key players in sending money to the Israel Project, has the mega group picked up where the Jewish gangsters left off? Well, in support of Greater Israel. Well, this invites another 12-paragraph essay from David, but I think I'm ready for it. What do you think, David?
Well, I think I always look at the partners and how they change and sort of rebrand themselves over time. And I wore my Ohio State colors today. I've got my scarlet and gray on specifically because of Ohio State University and Max Fisher being a football player at Ohio State and then moving up to Detroit, and then his relationship with people like William Wiseman and Julius Klein and William Stevenson. They were all part of the same intelligence network. And so and you were, John, you've been getting into the kind of the Farley building and the power of Farley in New York City with Spelman, and the post office, which is right across from Penn Station, which was demolished, of course. That's all part of the Max Fisher's nephew's development, which is the namesake of the Michigan Business School, Stephen Ross. And he, of course, is longtime partners with Donald Trump going back to the 80s. And they had the New Jersey Generals football team together, and they developed Hudson Yards together, which is the old rail yard of the Pennsylvania Railroad. So, one of the things I love about going on vacation with my family is that they will always do the tours that I want to do. And we do like the Grand Central Station tour. And I want to know about the Commodore, and I want to know about the Vanderbilts, and I want to know that their motif is the acorn and the oak leaf. And their family motto is that from every great oak grows from a tiny acorn. And knowing things like that, I like to know that stuff, because Vanderbilt is also deeply tied into the steamboat history and the ferries and the port of New York. Of course, he had domination of the Staten Island to Manhattan ferry. So all those things I'm interested in. And of course, the Grand Central and Penn Station also ties into this, because the Pennsylvania Railroad was the great rival of the B&O. And so that was sort of a railroad tycoon battle where you can sort of get to know some of the tycoon families. So when you compare a mega group, which is, the sort of Zionist World Jewish Congress sort of ideology, you can see where people fit in over time.
Awesome. And Vanderbilt, of course, we talk about the Panama Canal lately, but we should always remember that he was one of the two big rivals to first cross the Isthmus of Panama, not with a canal, but with a series of mule trains and small boats, and with a steamboat in the middle in the lake. I think it's called Lake Nicaragua. But that, was the way that people got to California from the East Coast for a long time. And he was very, very, very crucial. Just a cutthroat competitor. Anyway, Vanderbilt, Peabody, and all of these people, and what you're giving us, David, is a fascinating.
Can I add one more? That's
Yeah,
really one more
yeah.
that's really important. I think is the Astor and the Vanderbilt rivalry. There was a group called the 400, which was the 400 most elite families in New York City, and that was put on by the Astors, and the Vanderbilts wanted to be in the elite socially, and there was big rivalries because the Astors felt that the railroad money was dirty money and sort of new money, trashy. But you have to remember that with the Al Smith stuff that you're talking about, with the Al Smith
Dinner.
dinner, and his connection is with John Jacob Rascov and the General Motors Pierre DuPont, because they go the whole breakup of Rascov and DuPont from General Motors and DuPont is over politics. And Rascov is the chairman of the DNC and very close with Al Smith, and he's fighting with Alfred Sloan, who becomes the chairman of GM, and then Pierre DuPont and John Jacob Rascov leave. They work with Smith and with Coleman DuPont to build the Empire State Building on top of the old Waldorf Astoria before it moves across, to the Waldorf Astoria, adjacent to the Grand Central Station. But they build that on top, and then the Astors go to England, and then they become Cliveden, and the whole Cliveden set, and people talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, their house was donated by the Pratt family, which is a Standard Oil New Jersey family that donated the Council on Foreign Relations house in Manhattan. But their mirrored agency, the Chatham House, that was the Astors were in charge of that. So you have this relationship going back to the Astors being partners with Garrett Smith, who was the wealthiest landowner in New York that, led the Secret Six with John Brown and was a huge abolitionist supporter. That was Garrett Smith's father, and Astor were business partners. And when Aaron Burr was discredited, he sold his land holdings to John Jacob Astor in New York City, and he was the founder of the Manhattan Company originally. So all the Alexander, Hamilton, and Burr, there's so much intrigue in those rivalries. And then, of course, you get into these debates with, American System and Hamilton, and then they make the play Hamilton, and, the hardliners are, upset that they, stylize it with, modern interpretations and like all these things. But I look at the banking relationships and the railroads, and also the security of the railroad, because I think that ties into the Baltimore story, because the original Wackenhut, his big win was saving Abe Lincoln from being assassinated in Baltimore before he became the president. And that was sort of the beginning of Wackenhut being like a brand name, that's working with Rockefellers and doing, transportation security. But
He
also
worked for Pinkerton then?
What's that?
Wackenhut worked
I'm
for
sorry,
Pinkerton?
I'm mixing Wackenhut and Pinkerton. I meant the original
I thought so.
Pinkerton. Yes, the original Pinkerton was the Baltimore. But again, with this Bonaparte Patterson relationship, Joseph Bonaparte, the grandson of that marriage, is the Attorney General, the kind of the forefather of the FBI, comes from that same lineage.
It's fascinating, and all of the overlay of this European/Catholic power that is represented by the B&O team, and then they're clashing with the earlier people like say the George Mason investments in Ohio that you would be familiar with, and all of that. But President Trump has now brought in his new cabinet. Kash Patel was approved by the Senate very narrowly yesterday, but predictably. And now we've just exposed a lot of deep state connections that go all the way back to the Revolutionary era.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have kind of given President Trump a mandate to expose the fraud and get rid of this deep state that's behind the curtain, and give us transparency in government.
Yes.
But in view of all of these deeply rooted things that we have, well, let me ask Marcia first. What do you think? Do we have a chance here at a real revelation of all of the depth of fraud and abuse of our system and our country with President Trump?
I think so. Yeah. I wouldn't have said that a month ago. But in the month that Trump has been in office, he's acted decisively and boldly in ways that I think others have not. And it's why we've had no success in cleaning up the system and exposing the fraud. So I'm feeling optimistic right now.
Sovereign wealth funds. World leaders are now talking about sovereign wealth funds. Of course, Russia is one of them. Who is behind the accumulation of sovereign wealth, and does it portend the fall of fiat currency in favor of digital funds? This is a little complicated for me, so let's see if David has an answer.
Oh, well, to me, it's just the Safari Club BCCI story. The BCCI Bank was founded by the UAE president, the founder of the UAE, and he was the 75% owner of BCCI with the Bank of America, and that is that, to me, that's the framework. The UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund is the one that Steve Bannon works with, and they're also the one on the Belt and Road project with Rosneft and with what was the CEFC before their chairman was, grabbed and snatched after his business dealings with Hunter Biden, and then CITC, the old Henry Kissinger from the 80s Chinese joint venture, kind of jumped in for them. So that's the kind of the Belt and Road story. But that's where I see that a lot of the sovereign wealth funds that were kind of like, if people remember from 2016 when they had like the secret meetings with like Eric Prince and Steve Bannon and Don Jr. and Jared and BZ and George Nader and those guys, that's to me what that is. And part of the reason why I see that so clearly is because the ambassador to the UAE under Trump was John Rakolta, and his two of his daughters married people on my ski team. So, his wife went to high school with my dad. And then his sister-in-law is Ronna Romney, Scott Romney's first wife, and the mother of Ronna McDaniel, who was the RNC chairwoman. So that's why I don't know. That's why I see those kind of old Michigan relationships with the Romneys and their connections with Eric Prince and Blackwater and Grand Rapids kind of crew. So that's what I see.
There's our friend Jerome Brown. Thanks, Jerome. It's great to have you all, as always. Brightmore says the oak is Royal Oak. Okay, yeah, the famous British warship named the Royal Oak.
But John, you have to stop and do with the Royal Oak story about hiding in the Royal Oak tree, right? Isn't that part of the Jacobite story? That's why Royal Oak, Michigan is named after that.
I don't know this story, I have to confess.
I feel like it's Prince Bonnie Stewart or whatever. When he was leading a Jacobite rebellion, I feel like he hid in an oak tree.
Okay.
And also the state of Connecticut has an oak tree where they hid their charter in the charter oak. So the oak tree has some, again, like when I'm thinking about the trees, I mean, I think that, you mentioned a couple shows ago about how you, you're interested in the laws of the forest and the park rangers and who has rights to the tallest tree in the kingdom if you need to make a ship,
Yeah, the king tree.
The king tree. Yeah, the king wood. Is that king wood, like King's Wood, the female version of Cranbrook? I don't know. It sounds like the same to me, but nobody ever said it specifically.
Yeah. Well, the story that always comes to my mind is that there was a Liberty pole in Maryland, and I can't remember where exactly it was, but it was, the Liberty pole was a symbol of the revolutionaries. The local militia company would meet there, and they would celebrate around a pole that was just a long wooden pole that was driven into the ground like a flagpole. About 10 years ago, I noticed, and I was studying this stuff. I was also really into Maryland's famous tree, the Y oak, which is at the Y plantation off of Route 50, which I
on the
had,
Eastern Shore.
which I actually had some acorns from, but well, that's another story. But that Y oak, plantation symbolized the unity of the early Catholic and Protestant forces when what's his name, Lloyd, married the woman from Calvert County. Anyway, the Liberty pole was saved and preserved, but they only had a small part of it left. And I read this article in the Baltimore paper that said that it had been given to Prince Charles, and I was devastated. So why did they give our Liberty pole back to this empire that we just got away from? But symbols like that, wooden symbols in particular, do interest me. That's true.
I have to at least mention the Frederick Douglass story with the Lloyds, because that is part of my the Francis Scott Key's wife was a Lloyd, and from the Y plantation. And so I think that's important for me because of the Douglass name and the history of Frederick Douglass with the abolitionists, with the Secret Six and the Garrett Smith and that group. But that's something that I think about, because the Lloyd name is also for banking and insurance people. That it's associated with Quakers, right? That the Quaker banks, oligarch banks, are Barclays, and Lloyd's were the Quakers. So that's again an intrigue, because like with what we're describing in Maryland, you had the Catholic history, and of course, Francis Scott Key's sister was married to Roger Taney, who was a famous Catholic, and for good and bad reasons famous. And so all those kind of like marriages, it's why I never really locked into any religion. I'm curious about all of them, but I just feel like there's so much where people have to change for specific, for reasons or whatnot, where I just don't never connected with any of them specifically. And I certainly never had a family that really, had adopted a tradition that I was rejecting. It was just not like, I mean, like I've mentioned before, I went to Boston College, so I had friends and roommates for when we had our graduation and the two Cardinals came, that my one friend, Paul, who went to, what's it called? Chaminade, the giant, school in Long Island that a lot of people from BC, like his grandma was like shaking because she was so happy that there were two Cardinals at the thing. And like, I didn't know anything about it, but for her, it was a, tremendous moment for her and her family. So I get where people have these traditions.
I recently did 2 shows on the book by James Carroll, speaking of Carrolls, about his relationship with his father, the General Joseph F. Carroll, who was the head of the DIA for 9 years, and he was the first head of it. And his James Carroll's experience is exactly like that. When his mother, they went to some Catholic function in which there was a couple of cardinals there, and he described exactly what you just saw. You just said that the woman was just absolutely, unbelievably happy to be in the presence of the two cardinals, And that power of that Catholic Church was so strong earlier that, if we think of that as being rare now, but 100 years ago, say when my dad was growing up, the Catholic Church, you revered these people, and they were the closest people to God. So you wanted to be, you wanted to be respectful. That was the whole story. That whole story of how the Catholic Church has weathered the past 120 years, but that's for another time. Let's see what else we got here. Prester John, hello. Sovereign wealth funds are fascism. Public-private partnerships. That is fascism. The idea of the government being run by the corporations, and then of course a sovereign wealth fund would be probably tailored to the needs of the corporations instead of to the needs of the common taxpayer. David, if I got that right?
I always try to keep these things very simple, and what I think the petrodollar system was to have a commodity that they controlled the entire supply chain from the extraction to the refinement to the delivery, and they could base a currency on something that they controlled all those things, so they had little areas where they could affect supply and demand and price at their whim, and use that as for tension, geopolitical tension, and that I think that any sovereign wealth fund is going to be created sort of out of that system. And the model that it was the Texas Railroad Commission was the original model, and then that became the Texas Petroleum Council, and then that became OPEC. And then with OPEC, then you had George Shultz and Pete Peterson, and the whole gang go off the gold standard and create the petrodollar recycling system. So to me, all these wealth funds are just sort of proxies off of that sort of basic system where you're going to buy weapons for us. You're going to trade all your clears in the currency that we control the markets for, but also the underlying asset that's used to value it. We control the ability to change value at our purposes whenever we want, in both the money side and the underlying asset side. That's what I think that any new system will sort of be based on, those concepts where you don't look at that as sort of being the goal.
Thank you. The oak tree, Morris Day, and the time. It's interesting. I used to play a lot of folk music, and one of the more colorful groups that I would play for from time to time would be the Morris Dancers. And they would dance, about teams of anywhere from 6 to 20 or so, and they dance these real old ritualistic dances, and they have these big sticks that they beat together and in rhythm, and or they'll just use handkerchiefs and be very flourishing in their dancing. But they have bells on their bells wrapped around their ankles, and they dance to a fiddle or a accordion or a concertina. Very fun, very unusual, just kind of like stepping back into the 1600s. If you remember the Morris dancer that danced all the way from where was it? From Newcastle to London. And
are they the ones that are all dressed up with the straw?
No, those are the mummers.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the Irish mummers.
Okay.
Oh boy, I do enjoy all the old folk traditions, but the new folk tradition. Speaking of mummers, is the mummers that are associated with the Shriners.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the ones that put on these huge parades in Philadelphia every year. And I swear, that looks like so much fun.
Yeah, you were talking
I
about
would like,
that the other day.
if I had knew about it, 50 years ago, I'd have moved to Philadelphia, got me a banjo, and marched along with those guys in their crazy outfits.
And you and
you
I
know,
would have never met.
no, we would have never met, and I probably would have got tired of playing those same old tunes. But it's a beautiful thing, that, and there's hundreds and hundreds of teams of these guys in Philadelphia, and they're all really good banjo players or saxophone players or drummers, and they even walk around with these big string basses. So, 5 or 6 guys with these basses that they're carrying. You ever seen them, Mark? Seen them, David?
I have not. I had a
Philadelphia.
lot of Irish music at Boston College. There's a lot of Irish pubs, so a lot of Irish folk songs when you were a student at BC. And then I also have to, tip my hat to some of my friends that grew up doing traditional Irish step dancing, as part of their family. Because when it got to be, time to dance at Who's on First next to Fenway Park, and they could transition into the modern dance very easily with that background. So I always appreciated that too.
Cool. I'm glad you did that. I played so many Irish Céilís when I was younger, playing in my band, the Blarney Stones Céilí band. Okay, Jerome has a book for us.
One of the places we went a lot was called let's see, oh my God, I'm gonna blank on the name. It's not Rick's. That was I can't believe I'm blanking on the name, but it's right by where it's right by where JFK grew up. It's right on Harvard Street in Brookline. It's like they have the monument and everything. So that was kind of fun. Somebody was asking me about Brookline, Mass, and that, and I lived there for 1 year, my junior year. So that was, yeah, I loved all those Boston experiences. Also got to go to Cambridge, and I was invited to the Hong Kong, which is a place to drink Scorpion Bowls, and that was where Pete Buttigieg later. He's younger than me. He went to Harvard, and he actually joined a secret society, the Order of the Kong, from the Hong Kong bar in Cambridge. So I was very happy that I got to go there, but sad that I never got asked to be part of the Tong Club. I could have been looking at the cave art in Somaliland and flying the planes around, but I didn't get that. So,
well, we got you instead.
But I do respect his Notre Dame history. We've got Notre Dame history in our, family, and of course my mom is from Indiana, so I'll go, head to head with Pete and his husband on, Indiana, and also Traverse City where they live now. I got to go cherry picking at my evil step grandmother's cherry orchards on Grand Traverse Bay as a kid. So that was a great memory, going up there. It's beautiful where he lives.
Sounds scary with the evil.
It's very, very close to the camp, the band camp that everyone is afraid of, Interlaken,
Interlaken.
Yeah. And of course, my experience was that people that went to Interlaken were the best people in the band, and would go to Juilliard literally after, and they were really serious musicians. And it wasn't I never heard any stories of anything odd happening there. But again, I wasn't there, and I went to the camp in Vermont, so I wasn't there to report on any of it.
Yeah, Diane Sayre, the presidential candidate from the LaRouche organization, is a graduate of Interlaken. She's a trombonist like I was.
The high school that I went to, it was a fairly new high school, and the year that I started at that high school, we had just moved. This was in Raleigh, North Carolina. We had just moved there, and the year that I started, they had a whole new faculty and headmaster, and several of the faculty and the headmaster had come from Interlaken. Of course, this was a very long time ago. very long time ago.
Well, my friend Paul, the one that was the Chaminade, he was a North Carolina business school person. So I was in the Raleigh Triangle area, and my third grade teacher's dad was the chancellor of the University of North Carolina. So, and she went to Duke. So, all of those Tobacco Road rivalries. My really close friend is Shane Battier. He was national champion, All-American player at Duke. So, and my sister's her roommate in New York's mom was the assistant to Mike Krzyzewski. So yeah, all the basketball
Wow.
stuff. I'm really, very, I love all the basketball stuff. I mean, it's why I wear the Bobby
Yeah.
Knight sweater right now. It's why I'm wearing the red
Yeah.
IU sweater.
Yeah. I mean, when I lived in Raleigh, because I stayed there, I went to school in Chapel Hill at North Carolina, and then moved back to Raleigh and lived there for another 10 or so years. And yeah, I mean, the basketball there is just, it's wonderful.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice area. I loved it. I mean, I was, I was living, I was actually at the dry cleaning trade school. So I was in Silver Spring, Maryland, when he was like in his welcome week of business school. So I went and visited him, and we, went up and down Franklin Street, and we went to, I think it wasn't Scores, that's the different place, but I forget the place, but we saw Sean May, who was the big basketball star at North Carolina at that time. And his dad, Scott May, was the Indiana basketball star. And my grandparents used to see him shooting hoops with his dad, Scott May, at the YMCA in Bloomington as a little kid. So all those things, like, I'm always like very excited to, I loved all the basketball.
Yeah.
And
Well, when you
sports
live
and
in the
everything.
Triangle area, you can't
It was
not
fun.
follow basketball. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, businesses shut down or, have TV sets everywhere. Well, of course, I'm sure now it's all on the internet too during basketball season. It is the focus of the entire community.
Are you going to give us your song about Duke University?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Because, because there was a song that we sang at North Carolina. All right, fine. I don't give a damn about Duke University, Duke University, Duke University. We don't give a damn about Duke University. We're from Carolina. Yes, that's what we used to sing. But I actually always liked Duke. I would always cheer for Duke unless they were playing North Carolina.
Richard Nixon went to Duke. Come on.
Did he? I didn't know that or remember it.
Okay, a question about the Johnny Chirucci, and I do not know Johnny Chirucci on the history of Catholicism and the Jesuits, but it sounds interesting. I'm always interested to learn more about those interesting subjects.
Yeah, someone to look into.
I'm always looking into the Jesuits, and anyway, so that sounds like a good idea. I'll have to find out who he is. If you got a link,
John, I have a good Jesuit Notre Dame University of Detroit Mercy Law School person that was the chief counsel for General Motors. His daughter is one of my mom's very close friends, and he was a mass everyday person, and he sent every single one of his kids and grandkids to either Sacred Heart or U of D in Detroit. And he traveled a lot as working for GM, and he would always go and find the church and the bakery wherever he would travel. So I don't know if that's but they were so into the Sacred Heart, and they're sort of my go-to people. So like when you get like a Keith Ellison that comes out as like the first Muslim congressman, swearing in on a Quran, it's amazing to me that he was a U of D alumni, which is, the Catholic, Jesuit school on 6 Mile, and, to convert is just odd. But that's, that's also ties into the Father Coughlin story, because when Coughlin was, being supported by the bishop in Detroit, who is Gallagher, they built him the big house. The Fisher brothers built him a house in Palmer Woods, right across from U of D, and that's that was part of the story, because apparently he was the one going against like Joe Kennedy and Pope Pius XII and Francis Spellman. And so whenever you get into these sort of Catholic Jesuit rivalries. I'm like really focused on the Coughlin story because he was on my dad's paper route as an old man. You know, he lived on Lakeside in Birmingham. And so he delivered papers to him. And of course, his church was the Shrine Church in Royal Oak, Michigan. And there's a Shrine High School next to it. And my next door neighbor was a Shriner, and he didn't talk anything about it. I didn't know it until recently. He sold tickets to the Shrine Circus to our family when we were little. He was a great neighbor. He wasn't creepy. He wasn't riding his little tricycle around with the fez on or anything like that. He was a really nice neighbor, and they
Don't they only do that in parades?
I don't know what they do. That's why it's so confusing. To me, I was a little kid. I loved the baseball. I loved the Tigers. They had Pass, which was the, special cable station to watch every Tiger game. And they would sit there smoking cigarettes, watching Tiger games. And I thought it was literally like the king of the world, that they could watch any Tiger game they wanted at their house. I thought it was incredible.
Well, David, I'm sure that those fezzes that they wear didn't come from Smyrna, Turkey, when the Pattersons were doing the trade. I'm sure that they didn't come from there.
Well, my mom, when she entered her nursery school, she had the Turkish head of the proximity fuse program from RCA named Sarkis Tarzan. His daughter was in the nursery school class, and she remembers as a 5-year-old going to their house and her brother locking himself in a closet and eating the entire chocolate cake. And she couldn't believe that anyone would ever eat an entire chocolate cake. And that kid got chewed out by their maid. And that is my memories of the head of the proximity fuse program was him eating that. And then they didn't go to the same school as her. They actually went to Park Tudor in Indianapolis. That's the Josiah Lilly School, the really fancy private school in Indianapolis. And of course, they had the music collection of I'm gonna blank on the name. Oh my gosh, he wrote like My Old Kentucky Home and like
Stephen Foster.
Yes, the Stephen Foster archive was at Park Tudor. Josiah Lilly built a special archive for it, and then it moved to Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and now the Ford family has it up in Dearborn at the Henry Ford Museum. So for people that like Stephen Foster music, the Lilly family has ties to it. Josiah Lilly was a lover.
The sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. They had some terrible flooding there this past week. I haven't heard any follow-up, but it sounds like it was pretty devastating for a while.
Not a lot of coverage, I have to say. I saw one article and then nothing.
I've been neglecting the chat.
Yeah, we're way behind.
Marcia, why don't you pick one and we'll...
Well, no, don't
put it on you? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only one that can scroll through it, because I am John.
It's your show.
Let's pick this one. Garden Girl. Will Donald dissolve the Fed and set up a new monetary system? Well, that opens a big, broad question of what the heck is going to go on with our monetary system. And I don't know. Marcia, do you have any thoughts, or should we just dump it on David again?
I think anything is possible. I think that there's going to be a lot of starts that don't get to the end because there will be court challenges. And I think in some cases, the courts will say, no, you can't. And in some cases, the courts will say, yes, you can. And I think it's, anything is possible. But I am very optimistic that whatever happens will be in line with the Constitution ultimately. And he may suggest some things that are not constitutional, and the courts will decide.
Wow. Wouldn't it be? I mean, that would just lower my overall tension, by 80%, because, when it was possible that Harris was going to win,
Mm-hmm.
I was so tense. I was so worried about it because, things were just looking really bad. Looked like we were going to get into World War III if they had another term.
Right.
And so, but I have not been a Trump person either. I'm just like, you got to make a choice. And I'm glad myself that we're seeing all of this openness. Many of our friends, like Hervoye Moritz, for instance,
Mhm.
who we talked to this week, are very, very worried about it and very skeptical about, for instance, imposing some federal digital currency upon us, and then we get tracked for every transaction that we do,
Right.
and they can snatch it from our bank accounts, and all of this technological nightmare that's looming in the background. I like to get some comments on that from you guys.
Yeah, well, I can say that the narrative is telling you to be afraid. And there's all of this stuff out there that is being posed as Trump might do this, Trump could do this, and it's all designed to make us afraid.
David?
I agree. My conclusion as a finance student was that, financial markets are just meant as to either get people really excited and feel overconfident, or to get them to, defeated and financially ruined and forced to make decisions they wouldn't normally make if they didn't have that pressure being applied. So um, it's, to me, the financial system is a tool. Can be good or bad. I think I always think of models of like simple systems that are effective, and like I think of like Easy Pass, something where you know you don't wait in lines anymore, so there's like a public good, but the system is sort of passive. But again, if you want to use a system like that um, to pressure people, or to make destabilize people, you can. So again, like, the systems are good. Like, I mean, they can be efficient, but a lot of banking is secrecy, and that's a big problem. I mean, of course, I always think of like I talk a lot about the going into World War II, as far as the 1933, and you've got the Michigan bank holiday that leads to a federal bank holiday that leads to Adolf Hitler becoming the chancellor of Germany and having these partnerships, and sort of um, the creation of the Bank of International Settlements from that same era, the Young Plan, coming out of that. So I mean, it's a whole system. That's the thing, is that the financial system has intelligence and media and everything. So I mean, it's a complex problem. So I just try to make it easier to understand, but it's a big problem, and Trump has his hands full. But the guy that he's got in there is a Cantor Fitzgerald person, and what was their mark on the industry, and it was high frequency trading. And Cantor Fitzgerald was an electronic market maker, which is a little bit different than like a buy side or a sell side investment bank. The I worked at Munder, so I was on a buy side firm where we would buy stocks through a market maker, or through a big investment bank that you've heard of, like a Goldman, or Citibank, like whatever, like one of the giant banks. And you could choose who you would trade with. So there was a advantage for them to be in your graces, because you would make a decision on who you would give a commission to. And then when I was there, Bloomberg was lurking, and the Bloomberg terminal became a hub for all transactions. And then you had the LiquidNet product, which was like the Napster, where it would scan trade blotters, and it would link shops directly, where you could trade for 50 basis points instead of paying a 6% commission. And that kind of took out a need for a lot of the market makers and really destabilized the industry. And I also look at the owners of the New York Stock Exchange, and the blonde woman in Georgia, the senator, her husband is the owner of that, and she was Loeffler, and they're all in. I mean, they're all in the this New York Stock Exchange, and all these different things have kind of multiple layers that they're involved in. So it's complicated, and people are play specific roles that distract you from their other functions. So I try to help. And I know the name Loeffler will jump out for people that are sleeper agent and bioweapon people. The name Loeffler is an old IG Farben, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute name. So just something to keep in mind.
I didn't make the connection, but I've spent a
Well, when
lot
your
of
husband is the runs the exchange, I mean, you got to think, oh, well, you know, how did they get in there?
we're running out of time. Let's take this one, though. It's interesting to me. Avian flu now in the news for killing domestic cats very quickly. Cats were pets of domestic fowl workers. Scientists suspect fowl workers had bird flu, but the fowl workers refused to be tested. Well, it just brings up the whole, we talk about they try to keep people scared. And, leading up to the election and to the inauguration, the drum has been beating for people like Peter Hotez with his little bow tie and are trying to tell us, there's doom is right around the corner, and so we better kill all the chickens.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe hopefully we're turning the corner on that because like Joe Biden said, if we didn't get vaccinated, we were all going to be dead by spring, and it was going to be what was it called, the winter, what winter was it, David? The
Dark winter.
Dark winter, yeah.
Yeah, you had to be a Game of Thrones fan to know about winter is coming and the whole White Walker, fear that they were tying all those things in. One thing that I never got to do, but when my mom was a little girl, she used to go to her grandma's farm in southern Indiana, and she would gun down the fox at the chicken coop. And my mom heard the blast as a little girl when she killed the fox. So in the Pauley family, that was the chickens. When the chickens died because of the fox, you would get shot with the shotgun as the farmer. So that was the way of the farm. I know that people, I don't know. I feel like the farmers are. I mean, that was the group that my mom's family was part of. Was the Granger type people. So
Grange is a code word for Templars, where they kept their horses.
they had the Templar funerals, and I mean, we had the Uncle Boney necklace or whatever. So we had all these like hinted things. Nothing was ever explicitly said. It was always like you had a relative that was George Washington's aide de camp and were related to Francis Scott Key, and that's like it, and no more, because a lot of the relatives died. My grandpa's mom died, like as an infant, and then his sister that took care of him died when he was 6. So he had, there was a lot of like, the kid fell in the well and the meteor, hit him in the head working in the field. Like there's a lot of bad stories that I was always aware of. And so, there's a lot kind of going on in that, boring old, southern Indiana, where you just don't think the Patoka or the Wabash River and the White River mean anything, but they do.
David Cranmer, Underdown, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Marcia, I appreciate very much all your comments.
Always glad
today,
to be here.
And I've had a good time here on our first little trio expedition here on Live Chat Friday. So we'll do it again. And David, I know you got more stories for us, so you got to come back.
My memory of you guys was going to your dad's gravesite and seeing the thing that struck me at that site, because it's creepy, were the holly trees, the grove of holly trees in front of the Lord's kindness. And that was something for me personally. Like my grandparents in Bloomington had a holly tree in their backyard, and the cardinals used to land on it. And then when I bought my house, the holly tree was a very huge draw. It was a very mature holly tree for Michigan. And then when we went to Keeneland, which is the horse racing in Lexington, the beautiful horse racing property, they had beautiful holly trees, beautiful sycamores, and beautiful magnolias. So for people that like those things, go to Keeneland and see them.
The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. All right, guys, it's always just so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you again soon. Everybody have a great weekend, and I'll be
Thank
back.
you for being here with us, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
All right, we'll see you Monday. Bye-bye now.